Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Nathan Pomart and this is Loose, the Climate Tech podcast. Every week we interview a founder and explore the stories, ideas, innovations, and businesses behind some of the most inspiring climate tech companies that have a tangible positive impact on our planet. This show is designed to help you learn, instigate optimism, and inspire further action towards addressing the climate change challenge that we face as a global community. If you are an entrepreneur, business leader, or investor interested in learning more about the climate tech space and how you can play a part in it, this show is for you. My guest today is Falk Siegel. Falk is the CEO and co-founder of Kleta. A Barcelona-based bike subscription startup, Kleta enables its customers to get a mechanical or electric bike as a service for a monthly fee they can cancel anytime. As such, they facilitate wider adoption of bicycles, helping reduce emissions and making cities more sustainable. Kleta raised seed investments from leading Spanish sports angels such as NBA player Marc Gasol and FC Barcelona goalkeeper Marc-André Ter Stegen, and from institutional investors such as Fondo Bolsa Social and Sabadell Bank. A German who made Barcelona his home, Falk started Kleta after perceiving the gap in his own life for a convenient bike option. That is the focus of our discussion. In this episode, you will learn about how transitioning from car to bikes at scale can have profound, wide-ranging impacts on our cities, the infrastructure that companies like Kleta are building to enable this, and what bike emerging markets are, and why there is so much potential for further bike adoptions in these markets. I hope you enjoy my discussion with Falk Siegel. So, Falk, I'm very excited for this conversation. As you know, this is a podcast about climate tech. So I often end up interviewing, hard manufacturing companies, and they are great. But the topic we're going to talk about today, which is basically how you get people to switch from cars to bikes, is at the same time so simple and so powerful when you take it at scale in terms of the impact that it can have on carbon emissions and how it can transform our cities. So I'm really excited to dive into this. Maybe to get us started, you can tell us a bit about your story and how you ended up, starting Kleta here in Barcelona.
Yeah, first a pleasure to be here, Nathan. Here in the warehouse, and thanks for if setting this up like this. I think that's the way how we like it. A bit by a bit more about me. I'm German, but haven't been living in Germany for a long time. So I lived in different countries. I lived in the States. I lived in Colombia for a long time. I lived in UK, and in the UK, it's also where I got to kind of got familiar with the startup world, and I got hooked up right away. So I worked in a fintech for 2.5 years, and then changed and got back to Spain, actually, where I'd been living before, and worked in a different startup that was really like booming 3-4 years ago, and like in my previous job, like also let's say Kleta started to emerge. It's always it's a process.
Sure.
You don't
Definitely. You don't know when it really starts.
You don't know when it really starts. Kind of looking back, you see, let's say the points where like where something emerged and maybe a tipping point. In my case, it was first of all, let's say a pain point that I felt every day, right? And it was actually my co-founder and me who had a pain point that we shared. We were working at the same company, and I was using my own bike, and he was using one of the shared systems that we have here in Barcelona. And I was at some point fed up of taking my bike to my place, bringing it up the stairs, putting it in the elevator, and not leaving it outside.
Yeah.
Because you live in Barcelona, you know that people don't leave their bikes outside.
For sure.
Because they know they're gonna get stolen, and it's a stereotype, but it actually happens to your own bike.
Yeah.
And my co-founder, who had like one of the sharing bikes, he got late to every second meeting. He doesn't tell that, but it was like this because there's, let's say, there's a limit, right? Especially in peak hours, where you don't have stations with bikes, or where like the stations are full. So this is, let's say, I think where, let's say, the initial motivation started.
And when was that? When was the first bike on the street with the first user?
So the idea, let's say, in mind, we had at the end of 2019. And then, I mean, we were still working in our startup, and I remember that I bought a whiteboard to kind of set it up a bit properly 2 weeks before COVID. So COVID hits us, and it's like, okay, what are we going to do with our lives?
Sure.
Basically, that's what, I mean, everybody of us, I think, felt like.
Yeah.
And a week later, we were, we couldn't go out. We decided to launch Kleta, and launching Kleta at that point was, I mean, thinking about, okay, how can we launch a startup, a hardware startup, with no money in the bank, with no investors, because there was no way of raising money at that point for us first time founders.
Yeah.
And what we did in order to validate the project here was calling all alquileres turísticos, you would say in Spanish, or let's say all the touristic rental bike shops.
Sure.
Because they didn't have tourists, and they knew that they wouldn't have tourists for a long time. So we rented out 30 bikes. And actually got them on the street the first day they let us out here in Spain after the lockdown. And that's how the first Kleta actually was on the street, which was in May 2020.
Got it. So about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so tell us a bit about where you are now. Right? Clearly, you've grown. You're now in multiple cities. How many bikes do you have out there on the street? And tell us a bit about sort of where at which point of the story are we now 2.5 years later?
Yes. If I extend it too much, you let me know, and,
Sure.
and then I'll cut it, because it's a question. It's a good question. Huh? Where are we now is easy to say. I mean, we're in 3 cities: Sevilla, Valencia, and Barcelona,
Yeah.
with more than 2,000 active subscriptions. So with more than 2,000 bikes on the street. I mean, you see a lot of bikes here in the warehouse,
Yeah.
but we do have, yes, more than 2,000 bikes on the street. The journey until now was, I think, marked by a few tipping points also. So I think, looking back and shortening, let's say, your question on my answer, we started with a different target group in mind.
And
right?
so I'll ask you about the journey as we go along.
Yes.
What is your target group today? You were telling me about B2B, B2C earlier. So
Yes.
what is the mix of users of your subscriptions?
We focus completely on B2C. So we do have some B2B customers, but our focus, and more than 85% of our customers are B2C users. And in
Yeah.
that case, it's not just B2C, it's a local user, right? And by local user, we mean somebody living in the cities where we operate. That's super important for us, because we initially focused on a different target, which is somebody who was here for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, student from abroad, but clearly realized that the problem that we could solve is much more important and much bigger for a local target, because we realized that we're acquiring users who switch to bikes as the main transport method, right?
So tell us more about this, because this is the really key link with the impact that you have on the
Yes.
planet, right? Clearly, getting people to switch, to commute less by car, more by bike, means that your impact on emissions is very strong. That's not necessarily obvious when you think about your business immediately. So what did you find out about what do people switch from, and what unlocks the fact that they may be switching from cars to bikes?
I mean, looking backwards, it's easy to answer. I think during the journey, it wasn't as obvious, and it was something that we found out along the journey, right? The reason why they change is looking backwards again is easy, because if you're thinking about switching to bikes, there are pain points, right? And there are problems that we solve with our subscription service, which is, I mean, you don't have to buy an e-bike, which is usually very expensive. You don't have to, think about theft, which is also a big problem.
Sure.
So we solve these pain points, which is especially a pain point for somebody who's thinking about switching to a bike, because you don't know if you can actually use the bike for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So you might just want to try it out, but hey, you're not sure. So that not being sure makes you not buy a bike, purchase a bike, or make you not use the service. So
And what is the mix between mechanical bikes and electric bikes out of the people who take on your subscriptions?
we're actually getting very close to 50-50.
Okay.
So in Barcelona, we actually surpassed, let's say, our e-bike subscriptions actually surpassed mechanic bikes,
Yeah.
and all e-bikes with local users. So we don't allow, for example, delivery guys to use our regular B2C bike. So we actually get to a target that is changing, from a car or from a bus, metro, or a motorbike to a bike. And
Yeah.
that's, when we started to realize that, I think that's where we really fell in love with our own project. because we felt the difference we can make and the impact that we have. And just to give you a figure, I mean, more than 80% of our users switch to bikes
Hmm.
thanks to Kleta. So this is, let's say, a real impact that you feel, and that we also hear from our customers.
Yeah,
And I mean, when we got to know each other, I think you got linked up or hooked up by me telling you, hey, we changed lives
exactly.
by by incentivizing and facilitating the usage of a bike. And that is not something that we kind of wrote down because it looks good for investors or it looks good for everybody else. Our clients told us, hey, you're changing my life because I'm rediscovering my city in a completely different way.
And do they tell you what kind of journeys do they replace? What kind of journeys do they do now by bike instead of doing by car?
Yes, I mean the majority of our users use, let's say, the bike for commuting. So they go to the office and they don't use the car, or they don't use the motorbike and use the bike. And then we have a lot of families. We have a lot of young families. So they, instead of taking the two children or one child in their car, they go to the schools or the kindergartens by bike.
Yeah,
And then you have, let's say, a very very beautiful impact that you see being in the city. I mean, you live in Barcelona, and I think you see quite a lot of yellow tires.
absolutely, absolutely. And then we're gonna see them after when we go into the warehouse to take a look around. But I do see a lot of them on the street. Um, and as we will show the warehouse a little bit later, would be great if you could walk us through like what are the key activities that you as a company do to enable this bike as a service.
Yes, very good question. I think our core is making sure that our customers is happy, with our service alongside the entire journey. Because in a subscription service, it's much harder, much more complicated than selling a product. Because if you sell a product, you basically did the sale, right? Then there's an after service or after sales, but a lot of bike companies, they don't take care of the after sales, so they have external parties that take care of it. And we do take care of, let's say, acquiring the customers, onboarding the customers in our physical stores that we have, and then taking care of incidents and maintenance with our mechanics on the street.
Yeah,
So we make sure that our client is happy, because that's the only way how we grow, right? With an awesome user experience. So let's say where we focus on, what our core is making sure that our client is happy alongside, like, during the entire lifetime that he or she is with us. It sounds very trivial, but as soon as you scale up, it is much harder than you think, because in a subscription service, you're much more, you want your bike to be good every day.
yes,
If it's your own bike, you say, okay, I bought it, well, I go to the workshop in 2 weeks.
yeah.
If it's on a subscription, well, you want it to be nice tomorrow. So you
So
it
how many mechanics do you have now out on the street, or here? But I guess like delivering that service, or we
yes.
fix your bike within what is it, 24 hours that you commit to, or
We commit to 48 hours, but
48?
we commit to 48 hours without you being at the bike. So
Okay,
let's say what we do in different, let's say, to other competitors, is we don't meet with you in the majority of times, because we don't want you to be pending on a certain day or time when we meet you.
sure.
So we go to the bike because we know where your bike is parked, and then we take care of it. How many mechanics do we have? I mean, in Barcelona, we have roughly 1,500 subscription,
Thousand.
thousand
Okay,
and a half active subscriptions, and we got two mechanics working
okay,
full time on the street, because I mean that's our core. So
definitely.
and we
Yeah,
do have a lot of more mechanics here in our warehouse. I mean, you've seen some of them.
yeah.
We do also prepare the bikes, obviously, before they go out, and before we deliver them in our stores. So we do have mechanics that take care of this. But yeah, our mechanics on the street are our heroes, our superheroes.
And what
Because
are the challenges that you're sort of cracking now when it comes to keeping that service level, or keeping that quality of service as you grow very fast, right? You were telling me you're growing quite fast at the moment. So what are the things that you're trying to do to keep up with your growth?
it's a good question. I mean, yeah, I told you that we did or that we do in a 30% month on month now in September, which is high season for us. And it challenges, I mean, projecting your growth, and then obviously also kind of projecting, let's say, the stuff that you need, right? And the hands that you need to maintain the service level at very high levels. That sounds easy, but sometimes you project something else than you experience. So I think speed is the most important point, and kind of measure the status of the health of our customers and be very easy, be very fast in reacting and taking care of these, let's say, no, in Spanish you would say puntos débiles, no, these some of pain points in the operation chain that you have,
Yeah.
to kind of know where you have to react. So I think this is key for us, just to know, the challenge is to know how our customers really are,
Yes.
how happy they are with the service, and when we see that we're like lacking at some part, be super fast and adjusting.
What is the thing that surprised you the most as you are scaling this operation? Curious to hear if there were one or two things where you thought, wow, this is much more, maybe much more complex than I thought it would be.
Um, well, this is probably not surprising for a second time or third time founders. For first time founder, need managing people in different stages of the company. And let's say we have a high seasons and then lower seasons, right? So the pressure is also very different. And how people react to, let's say, different circumstances is much more complex than you think. What surprises me is like how fast you grow as a founder into, let's say, the different roles that you take care of. And how fast I got older. People now tell me that I look like 35, when 3 years ago they told me I look like 25. So that is something
It's
more
okay.
personal.
It's okay. And let's switch maybe to the sort of the go-to-market side of your business.
Yes.
Tell us a bit, um, you know, how do you get people to find out about your service? Like, what is the journey for people to discover and then adopt solutions like yours, like Kleta?
Yes. The most important thing, is before you talk about channels, is really like let's say know your target, like who's,
Yeah.
let's say, the target, at least for now, the lowest hanging fruit, and how do I have to communicate to them. So I think this is the major point. And when we realized, hey, we're targeting somebody who's changing, to bike as a main transport method, you kind of also figure out what transport methods are they using now. No, if you think about, let's say, less conventional channels. Obviously, we do also, let's say, paid channels, which work well for us. But then we have a physical product, so we try to use our physical product when we acquire users, right? And in different, let's say, offline strategies. So, and that's what we focus on. Okay, where are our customers now, and having certain pain points that we know,
Yeah.
and how do we present, let's say, our physical product in a way that they see it as, an options that they want to try now. And then afterwards, we focus a lot on referrals, on recommendations. I mean, more than 50% of our users are recommended by existing users, and something that we incentivize a lot. And I think that goes along, let's say, with the user experience itself.
Yeah.
So it's a bit less maybe conventional than other companies, but because we understood we have a physical product that stands out. We have a bike with a yellow front tire, and we're having an impact that is very easy to, let's say, understand. If you experience a pain point in your car, if you experience a pain point in the tube. I mean, I lived in London for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I had a pain point myself a year living in London using a tube. When I changed to a bike in London, my life changed. So let's say this is something that we try to, let's say, express in our marketing.
And so, what are
well.
some examples of unconventional physical marketing that you might be doing?
I mean, for example, there was in Sagrera, here in Barcelona, in one of the metro stations, and it got shut down during the summer, during August. So there was, let's say, a bus line on the other side, but the buses were always crowded. So at some point we decided just to put a small stand, one of our employees, and two Kletas right next to this, and talk to people, right?
Yeah.
Because they had the paint, but they were waiting. They had to get into like a super crowded bus. And these are, let's say, a lot of things where we try to be very local with our approaches.
Yes.
Obviously, there are, let's say, more centralized operations that we do on the marketing side, but we try to be very, let's say local in our approach, because I mean, eventually our mobility is local. I mean, mobility has always been local, and we do think that mobility has a strong local impact.
You can go to fuel stations, and as people take out their credit cards to pay for the ever rising, fuel bill, you can tell them, hey, with us, you don't pay for the fuel. You are the fuel.
I'm gonna tell that to our marketing team. But yeah, there's something in online marketing, for example, that we do use. I mean, this is a good example. But yeah.
Okay. Let's switch gears. I wanted to talk a bit about the other cities that you are opening.
Yes.
I think you're opening, or you have opened already, Sevilla and Valencia.
Yes.
Where are you there, and what are the challenges or the key steps when you go into a new city to make sure you ramp up quickly?
Yeah. we decided to, let's say, open Valencia and Sevilla also, let's say, to learn before we go abroad. I mean, let's say the mission that we have doesn't stop here in Spain.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a global problem that we want to solve, or at least, let's say, in bike emerging markets, something where we focus on. And because, like, in bike emerging markets is where a lot of people are not using a bike yet, so that's what we focus on. But we decided to open up Sevilla and Valencia to learn, right? Because these are two
Sure.
different cities. One city that is that doesn't have a lot of competition in terms of mobility, which is Valencia. And then you have a city that is very, let's say, crowded with, let's say, other mobility services, which is Sevilla, and also, let's say, a completely different mindset than, for example, here in Valencia and Barcelona. How's it going? Very well. I mean, we launched Valencia end of last year, and we're getting to 1,000 active subscribers in Valencia. So that is going very well. Sevilla in the beginning was more difficult than we thought, because we did a typical first time launching mistake when you open up a different country. I mean, for us it was the same country but very different language. The way you get to customers, the way you speak to customers. So we didn't really, let's say, we didn't really touch base with them. Something that is changing now and something that is going much better now. But yes, our approach in the first step was always, we want to learn and actually know, let's say, have a perfect playbook before we go abroad, which is the next step for us.
Okay, so going abroad is the next step. Are you already thinking of specific countries that you could disclose, or?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few countries, let's say, on the bucket list. You have the UK, you have France, you also have Italy, markets that are, in different phases, but overall, they share characteristics. These are still bike emerging markets. If you look at the model share of Paris, for example, it's still lacking behind Berlin, Munich. I'm not talking about Amsterdam or Copenhagen, but there's a movement also from the government side to incentivize the usage of e-bikes. Something similar happening in London, but the pain points that are not yet resolved, and so yes, we do see our impact that we want to have in these cities as well.
Yeah, and so this notion of bike emerging markets, you come from Germany, which is, I guess, in some cities much more bike developed. What is your vision in terms of what it takes to go from a bike emerging market to to the level of Amsterdam and Copenhagen, from the different stakeholders that you see having an impact on this?
First of all, it takes time. So I think that the horizon that we usually have, right, which is 5, 10, 15 years, is not enough to get to a level of Amsterdam, Copenhagen. But there's also a way, a way in between. If you think about the model share projected for Paris, it's around 15%.
Right.
At the end of
15% of journeys being made by
bikes at the end of 2030. Starting from around 2 or 3% in 2018. So this is a huge, change, which comes with infrastructure. So infrastructure is, let's say, a basic where, let's say, the government has to push. There's something that, is evolving, but you need to get to, let's say, critical mass of cyclists in order to get that wave, rolling.
Yeah.
So what you need is, let's say, public, let's say, public institutions incentivizing the usage, especially by better infrastructure. And then you have private companies like ours that need to incentivize the usage of bikes by resolving pain points, because the government is never going to solve your pain points, right? In that agile and fast way as private companies do.
Before we go and visit the warehouse, tell us a bit about your fundraising journey. I think you had 2 rounds. You've raised about 2.5 million so far. Who did you raise from, and how has the sort of the fundraising experience been?
Yes. Well, how has the fundraising experience been? It's always harder than you think. I mean, if you haven't done it, then you realize that you hear a lot of no's, and hearing a lot of no's is kind of getting out of your comfort zone overall. We've been very lucky, let's say, also with the investors that we got on board. I think we just, started. Sometimes you have to be at the right spot in the right moment, and that, I think, is something that we do have, because there's a change happening and everybody sees it. We did 2 rounds. So we did, let's say, first pre-seed round where we had some local business angels from the mobility space investing, and then the goalkeeper of Barcelona, Marc-André Ter Stegen, who helped us a lot in gaining credibility in Spain. I mean, he is one of the best goalkeepers in the world, and obviously, let's say, a figure that people know. And then we closed a seed round at the end of last year, where we had, let's say, the first institutional investors in Impact VC from Spain, getting in Banco Sabadell.
And also another famous athlete, no?
Another famous athlete, yes, with Marc Gasol, ex LA Lakers player, and that is something that has been working out very well for us. Not just for the press release afterwards, but really just to getting to the end consumer and getting more credibility. Because I mean, you look up to athletes, right? And
Yes.
you do sometimes you do stuff or you try stuff because an athlete is doing it, or the athlete is telling you, "Hey, try that." And that is something that we need. You know, we need, let's say, that push from athletes or let's say artists. In order to get people, you know, using the bike, because we know as soon as they use it, you know, they don't want to change.
Yeah. Look, Falk, we're gonna go take a look at the warehouse. So we'll cut here. Thank you so much for for taking the time, for sharing your story with us. And now we'll go and take a look at what the team is doing.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So, Falk, I mean, this is the most mobile podcast recording I've done up until now. We've just moved through the whole warehouse, and it's really interesting. I mean, clearly you get a sense of how much the local scale that you're building is important. Yes. Because you can serve 10 bikes from this warehouse, you can probably serve 10,000. I mean, tell us a bit about how you think about this and how you can become more efficient, as you were telling me.
Yes, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, you know, the basics in our case are done, and for us, let's say, getting to the first 1,000 users was much harder than getting to the next 2,000 in our case, which we did in 3 months. So there, the scalability aspect is huge, and especially going into e-bikes, something that that we've been focusing on from the start. I mean, we started with mechanic bikes just to get, let's say, our hands on the ground very quickly, but we know, let's say, that the juicy side of the business is on the e-bikes, because the operational costs behind are almost the same or exactly the same. And as you said, I mean, we do now have around 1,500 customers in Barcelona, and from this warehouse we could potentially serve 5,000, 6,000 without going into different space and with the same operations.
What is the juicy segment? And we hear the noise of the mechanics at the back. So I'll start again. What is it was super interesting what you were sharing about the segment of the market that is, let's say, more profitable, and those that maybe you've learned are not profitable for either price point or because they have much more incidents.
Yes.
Can you talk a bit about what you learned about this?
Without going into the details of the competitors that we talked before, but let's say you have, let's say, mechanic bikes, and especially the lower price point, that do have the same operational costs. I mean, you can make a bike, not make a bike like that way that you don't have to fix it up, but you still have operation costs tied to that, right?
Yeah.
So this is, let's say, not as attractive from juicy side. And then you have, let's say, riders, that they go into, let's say, into the e-bike spec, that have a lot of incidents because it's a commercial use, right? They use the bikes sometimes 12 hours a day, and they need their bike for the next day to work, to make money. So they have, let's say, much more incidents than, let's say, the target that we are targeting, which is somebody like you and me. I mean, we are using our bike to go to work, maybe to go to the beach, to do sports, or maybe visit our girlfriends. But let's say the usage is not as heavy, and we also do take care of our bikes. So let's say if you understand, let's say, the targets that you target, you understand that certain products, in our case especially e-bikes, and then buyer personas are much more profitable, or much more juicy than, let's say, others. And let's say this is something that in our case, our target persona where we really solved the pain points came first, but we understood that it's also a very juicy, let's say, target.
You explained to me that you design and make your own bikes, right, with a partner manufacturer. So why did you make that decision?
Honestly speaking, at some point it was a need, right? Because we were in pandemics, and there was no way to getting supply within 6 months. So at some point we had to, let's say, use local suppliers, and we had to, let's say, send some of the components that we needed to have on our bikes to the local manufacturers. And that's how we initially also started very, very early in providing, let's say, our own hardware to the customers. Something that we're doing, something that I just told you, is when we validate, let's say, new models, we do work with third parties, because it's a very easy and efficient way to launch, let's say, product. As soon as the product is validated, we get into, let's say, a phase where we, let's say, take more time in order to design the hardware for the purpose that we have, and understanding also, let's say, the feedback of the customers in that first validation project. So
and you're bringing IoT into your designs, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, for example, the new e-bikes that we're launching, designed for families, right? So that you can take up to 2 child in the back. You have, let's say, in own IoT, you have, let's say, also a unique way on unlocking your bike. So we do really innovate, let's say, on our products as soon as we, pass that validation stage.
Falk, I had such a good time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for making us discover the warehouse. I think it will fit nicely into the video.
Probably.
Cool.
Get some yellow tires on the video.
You can find out more about Kleta on their website, kleta.com. Check out the links we mentioned on the episode page. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on your favorite podcast app and stay tuned for more insightful conversations with some of the most inspiring climate tech founders.